He was once the man who struck fear into the heart of all Europe, but now, he had fallen into such a miserable and destitute state, with everyone rebelling and his kin deserting him. King Ragnar chose to hang himself to end his remaining life, but as fate would have it, a raven landed on his shoulder and pecked through the hanging rope. It seemed the gods didn't want him to die so easily. The dispirited Ragnar returned home and happened to see his congenitally disabled youngest son Ivar sitting on Ragnar's throne. Ragnar poured out his heart's sorrows to Ivar. He said he never thought that after a lifetime of military service, he would end up with everyone rebelling and his kin deserting him. He had wanted to invade England again to avenge the previous humiliation, but walking through the entire Viking tribe, not a single person was willing to follow him, including even Ivar's 4 good older brothers. Ivar was very dissatisfied with his father. He complained that his father had never asked for his opinion. Ragnar smiled bitterly as he looked at his son's disabled legs. Ivar knew his father's concerns, but he equally hoped he could be treated fairly like his brothers. Ragnar had no choice but to satisfy him. As soon as Ragnar finished saying Ivar's name, Ivar resolutely expressed his stance.
Ivar. Of course I'll come.
Perhaps Ragnar never thought this decision would make Ivar the Boneless name resound throughout Europe and become a lingering nightmare for England. The next day, with Ivar's support, Ragnar planned to recruit some warriors to follow him to England. He set up a stool and sat on the street for an entire day, but sadly, not a single person in the bustling crowd was willing to stop in front of him. But Ragnar still didn't give up. He put down his kingly dignity and stopped passers-by one by one to ask,
"And if I had the mind to raid, I would raid with your son, and not with you. For I believe the gods have deserted you. King Ragnar Lothbrok! You were on your own. Everyone hates you now."
Since the defeat in Paris, no one considered Ragnar a hero of the Vikings anymore. In addition, he concealed the fact that his people had been massacred in the Wessex settlement. This made Ragnar completely lose the people's hearts in the Kattegat Strait. After being mocked, Ragnar had no choice but to find his son Bjorn. Bjorn spoke of his plan. Now, he had no desire to invade England at all. Instead, he had a strong interest in the Roman Empire near the Mediterranean. After all, that was a place they hadn't been to before. This way, the enemy would have no defenses at all. But there was a thorny problem in front of them. To go to the Mediterranean, they had to pass the coastline of the Franks. Bjorn decided to go talk to his uncle Rollo then and have him let them through. Ever since the last battle of the Seine River, Ragnar had declared he no longer had this brother, so he didn't want to mention this person again. After failing to dissuade him, Ragnar also didn't want to interfere with his son's plans anymore. When parting, he finally thickened his skin and stated the purpose of his visit to Bjorn.
There is one thing I need your help with.
What?
I need ships.
After all, he was his own father. In the end, Bjorn still agreed to give Ragnar a few warships.
You've become a man in my absence. I'm proud of you.
What they don't know is that this parting will be yin and yang. Before long, the Harald brothers brought their fleet to the Kattegat Strait. They also came to join Bjorn. Ragnar saw the Harald brothers' grand fleet from the mountain and felt a complex mix of emotions. Before setting off, Lagertha also brought Astrid to see Bjorn off. Bjorn asked his mother why she didn't go with him. Lagertha's answer was profound. She said she had to stay to take back what she had lost. At the banquet, aside from Ragnar, all the friends who had once stained the Seine River with blood gathered together. Lagertha invited a Slog to jointly preside over the pre-battle sacrifice, but was rejected by a Slog.
You forget, Lagertha, I am the queen.
I never forget anything.
Although Lagertha was displeased, she didn't say much. This made her even more determined to get rid of a Slog. After completing the sacrifice, Lagertha found a Slog alone and then responded with her attitude in a domineering manner.
I know you can hear me. I want you to know that I can never forgive you for taking away my husband and my world. And look what you've done with it. You call yourself queen, but you will never be queen in Kattegat.
The next day, Bjorn and the others set off grandly towards the Mediterranean, but Ragnar couldn't recruit any soldiers at all with his influence. He had no choice but to dig up the gold and silver jewelry he had buried earlier. He had originally planned to use these things in Valhalla. Now, bringing them out again was a helpless move. It must be said, Money is indeed a good thing. With these chests of treasures, Ragnar was indeed able to recruit warriors, but it was like this: these people didn't look like they were going to fight, but more like they were going to a funeral. The young had all gone with Bjorn to the Mediterranean. Although these people were a bit old, at least it was better than nothing. Ivar told a slog that he wanted to go to England with his father. A slog tried to stop him in every way, but Ivar insisted on going. He didn't want to continue staying in the greenhouse because of his congenital disability. His mother doted on him in every way. This made Ivar suffocate. Now, being able to go to England with his father to prove himself, even if it was just for a day as a real man, Ivar felt it was worth it in this life. A slog couldn't persuade Ivar and could only agree. In the blink of an eye, it was the day for Ragnar to set sail. On the vast sea, there were only 3 drifting lonely boats. Compared to Bjorn's huge fleet, it was simply worlds apart. Looking at the group of old men on the ship, half of whose bodies were already in the ground, Ragnar wanted to cry but had no tears. But to fulfill his long-cherished wish, Ragnar still resolutely set off for England without hesitation. Ragnar took 3 warships with a total of over 100 people, preparing to go raid England, but the heavens are unpredictable. A deadly storm completely disrupted his plans. Since it was his first time on a ship, the congenitally disabled Ivar was so frightened he tightly hugged the pillar on the ship. To prevent his son from being knocked off the ship by the waves, Ragnar had no choice but to resort to tying Ivar to the mast. It must be said, this trick really worked. Several waves crashed over, but Ivar narrowly escaped them all. But then, 100-meter-high towering giant wave swept in. Ragnar looked at his son in despair. This time, he was probably powerless to turn the tide. The giant wave directly tore the small boat to shreds. Ivar, who was tied to the mast, also sank with the ship at an accelerating speed. At the critical moment of life and death, Ragnar used all his strength to untie the rope and then pushed his son to the water surface. When Ivar woke up again, he found himself washed ashore. Fortunately, Ragnar had also narrowly survived. But before they had time to rejoice, a group of people suddenly appeared in the distance. If the other party were English soldiers, they would surely be doomed. Fortunately, this group was also the elderly team members washed ashore. There weren't many people to begin with. After a storm, there were only about a dozen people left. They hid in a cave and discussed countermeasures. Now they were in enemy territory, and with so few people, wanting to find Egbert for revenge was simply a pipe dream. They had no ships to go back either. The only option now was to steal a ship on the coast and then hurry back home. But as soon as they left the beach, they encountered Wessex cavalry on patrol. Everyone immediately lay down, narrowly escaping disaster. However, the wreckage on the beach still exposed their landing location. Ethelwulf recognized Ragnar's flag at a glance. To escape pursuit, Ragnar led them through the forest. Suddenly, the appearance of a little girl interrupted their path. Who would have thought that Ragnar, the legendary leader who once rampaged across Europe, would now be so frightened by a little girl picking mushrooms that he didn't even dare to breathe heavily? To avoid leaving any more traces, they could only quietly wait for the little girl to leave. While everyone was resting, Ivar found his father alone and asked about his next plan.
You think it's possible we might be able to steal a boat?
I didn't come here to go back. That is why we can no longer travel with our friends.
What are you talking about?
It can only be you. And me.
It was obvious Ragnar was dead set on seeking revenge. He couldn't accept returning empty-handed like this, since a dozen people couldn't accomplish anything and would easily expose the target. They might as well adopt a desperate strategy and shed their burdens. That night, while everyone was fast asleep, they mercilessly slit the throats of their tribesmen one by one. Who would have thought that the agility of the disabled Ivar would be so nimble? A woman tried to seduce Ivar with her beauty to save her life. Unfortunately, she found the wrong person. After getting rid of their burdens, Ragnar carried his son and headed towards Wessex's capital. At the same time, Egbert receives news that a group of Vikings have died in the forest, killed by whoever they are. They searched the forest extensively for Ragnar's tracks. Ragnar and his son hid in the bushes to avoid pursuit. Here, Ragnar had a heart-to-heart talk with his son. When he saw Ivar's legs at birth, he thought this child surely wouldn't live long. After all, It was in the harsh environment of the Middle Ages, but later, I found I was wrong. The gods closed one door for you, but opened a window. You possess the tenacity, decisiveness, and wisdom that your brothers don't have. This journey with his father let Ivar experience a fatherly love he had never known before. In all these years, he had never talked so much with his father. As they were chatting, they arrived outside Wessex's capital. Ragnar put his son by the roadside and then told Ivar some important things. As soon as we go in, we'll have to separate. No matter what happens, you must control your emotions and act like an ordinary disabled person.
I think you brought me here for a reason.
No matter what they do to me, you have to act like a cripple. And then they won't feel threatened by you.
With that, Ragnar walked towards the gates and Ivar climbed towards the gates. The soldiers on the city gate were very surprised to see Ragnar and his son coming. Although they didn't know Ragnar, they could tell from their attire that they were Vikings. Ragnar claimed he wanted to see Egbert. Too bad Egbert wasn't there. Ethelwolf received him.
We may have captured him.
For the love of God, do you not know who this is? It's Ragnar Lothbrok, the king of the Northmen. Seize him!
Ethelwolf finally had a chance to vent his anger. Catching Ragnar wasn't enough. He also ordered the soldiers to give Ragnar a round of punches and kicks. Ragnar, enduring the pain on his body, kept reminding Ivar not to act impulsively. The exhausted Ragnar was beaten unconscious. When he woke up, he found himself locked in an iron cage.